I mean, as it is, everyone has chlamydia. I mean, I don't have chlamydia. Everybody else has chlamydia.
Are you advertising this on the podcast? Libertarianism is pretty clearly not going to work. Determinism, for me at least, is just as incoherent.
Hey, welcome to Owls at Dawn. We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world and decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit with impunity. I am Austin Hayden-Smith.
And I'm Troy Polidori.
And we are back to normal this week. Even though it's lovely having guests, now it's just me and Troy and our lonesome. Let's do it!
Alright, so our first segment is the shitty minutes where one of us rants about what's really grinding our gears this week. Austin, what do you have for us?
So mine is less a rant and more a rant/plea, or a rant-plea. It just has to do with this. I'm just going to ask you a question first. Did you see Corey Feldman's performance the other day promoting his new album?
If by the other day you mean 1987, then possibly. Because that's the last time I heard that name.
Okay, no. So Corey Feldman has been working on what he calls his labor of love for the past 10 years, and it is an album of sorts, I guess you could call it an album, that he releases with, I guess, what you could call music. And so he did a performance on, I don't know, one of those morning shows, like Good Morning America or The Today Show or some shit like that. I don't know what it was. But he did this performance, and it was so bad, man. It was so bad that it was good. Does that even, is it, like, you know how it completed the circle of badness? Because I don't even think it was real. Like, literally, it was so bad that I don't even think it was real, if that makes any sense at all. And so here's my rant. Don't let your children become actors. Do not do it. Do not do it. If your child comes up to you and says, I want to be a performer, you say no. If your child comes up to you and says, that looks like a lot of fun, that's acting is great, you say no. If your child comes up to you and says that they want to be a star or be in commercials, you say no. Do not do it, because guess what? They will get fucked up. It's not they might. They will get fucked up. You cannot assimilate back into the real world once you become a child star and once you get involved in that fucking world. It does something to your brain. It does something to your body. It fucks you up. No child actors, please. If they want to go into theater, maybe when they get into high school, but do not start that when they were kids, because goddamn, they're cute and they're cool, and I don't know, I feel for like these kids of like Stranger Things because they're like really fucking talented, but I'm afraid that Dustin is going to become a coked out heroin addict psychopath one day. And he's going to make an album like Corey Feldman's. And if you haven't seen it, just go watch the video and you'll see what I'm talking about. So that is my rant. Don't let your child become an actor.
I have a theory off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Is being an American actor basically that line from The Dark Knight? Either you die a hero, like you die a famous actor, or you live long enough to see yourself become an ironic joke.
Ooh. Yeah, that's actually kind of nice. I mean, I think that there are well-adjusted actors in the world, but here's the weird thing. I feel like the Hollywood system is less geared towards artistic expression and developing the craft of acting as an art, or the craft of acting as an element of the storytelling process through the visual medium, and more just about fame and developing celebrity. So it's about celebrity culture, it's about a fame culture, it's about making money. And I think that really just fucks with people, because you become an automaton, and you don't even have like the same type of agency that you would have otherwise. And I think it just fucks people up for the most part. Not entirely. I know some amazing actors who are well-adjusted, who are intelligent, who are engaged, who are thoughtful and critical, et cetera, et cetera. But gosh, man, I think especially as you become a child actor, it's because it doesn't let you develop those skills of socialization, and you just become a weird person.
Yeah, and I guess the expectations on you are a little overwhelming, too. Everyone expected Haley Joel Osment to become like, Robert De Niro, too. But then look at Robert De Niro. He's the poster boy for becoming an ironic joke.
Right? I know. So, anyway, if you have children, or if you're thinking about having children, don't stick them in commercials. Please. Just don't do it.
Does this mean we sterilize all actors?
What do you mean?
So they can't have kids?
Oh, yeah, that's actually a good idea.
Make it like a monastic thing.
Well, see, I think we should just sterilize all humans anyway. I think that when you're born, they should automatically, every male should get snipped, right? And then you wouldn't have to worry about teen pregnancy or unwanted pregnancies or anything like that. And then when they come to be such an age that they want to procreate, then after the age of 18, they can be allowed to go out there and get their shit retied together so that they can shoot real live ammunition.
So it'd be a default celibacy.
Well, I mean, it's not celibacy because you can still bang. You yeah. You're just shooting blanks. Yeah, exactly.
Think of the wanton sexuality, though, Austin. Think of the children.
No, I'm just thinking of the pleasure at this point. But can you imagine STDs would rise so much? Because people now, they like get deterred from having sex or they use condoms now because they don't want to have a baby. But then they'd be like, well, hey, I'm not going to have a baby, so screw it. So everyone, I mean, as it is, everyone has chlamydia, but even then it would be worse. So. I mean, I don't have chlamydia, but ladies.
Are you advertising this on the podcast?
Everybody else has chlamydia.
This was the Shitty Minute with Austin Smith, otherwise known as the Plea for Help.
All right, well, I gotta go get some antibiotics later. All right, sweet. Well, now we are going to be jumping into our main segment for the week. And this week we're going to be talking about something a little bit more explicitly philosophical, which I think some of our episodes are going to kind of be a little bit more culturally geared, and this one's going to be a little bit more intentionally philosophically geared. And it was actually inspired by a question that we got from someone on Instagram. His handle name is FastbackDan. And I actually know Dan. I used to work with Dan. I don't want to say his last name, just, I don't know, could there be stalkers out there? Is that against the rules? But I actually used to work with Dan a long time ago, and so it's great to know that they were able to stay in touch through these means, even as I'm on the other side of the world and many years later and stuff like that. But his question was pertaining to the issue of free will. So I reached out to Troy, and I said, what do you think? Would you be interested in doing an episode on free will? And, of course, Troy lit up and was like, absolutely, let's fucking do it. So we are going to be talking about what is free will, what is determinism, I guess, and what are the philosophical tensions between these two poles, and whether or not there is such a thing as free will and agency in a world of biological determinism or scientific determinism or theological determinism or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, let's get into talking about free will, huh?
Yeah, I think I should qualify Austin's estimation that I lit up. Was that a sort of subversive reference to my brain activity was in such and such a state because my fMRI image lit up?
Yes, literally.
That was intentional?
Yeah. So, yeah. So it wasn't free will. It was neuroscientifically determined that your brain would light up when I would talk about something, which happened, up to a half a second prior to you actually expressing your desire to participate in this conversation?
Yeah, for the Lebet experiment, between a fraction of a second and 6 seconds before, right? Yeah, I mean, this is one of those issues, man. Simultaneously, really interesting to talk about. At the same time, I fucking hate talking about it. I don't know how to square those two things. Because most of the discussion is so annoying, and yet you feel like you kind of have to address it, right?
Yeah, okay, so why do you hate talking about it?
I mean, I don't want to get too much. We shouldn't make this an entire second shitty minute about free will, but the majority of the discussion between the two kind of polar opposite schools of thought, which I guess we can address now, and one position would be libertarianism, sort of the more classically conceived position that individuals have free will because in any instance in which they are able to do otherwise than they did. And so if one is able to do otherwise, then they have free will. So you can use illustrations like if someone grabs your hand and slaps you with it, and they're physically overpowering you, and you had no ability to do otherwise, we would say you're not free. And so, in fact, if that happens and you hurt somebody else because someone else grabbed your arm and made you do it, you wouldn't be culpable for your actions because you had no ability to do otherwise. And that would be different than a position where you just went up and punched some guy right in the face of your own volition because you could have done otherwise. And so we separate those sort of punishments or rewards for those actions based upon your ability to do otherwise. That's libertarianism. It's pretty simple and common sense, right? The opposite pole would be determinism, which states that we are, in fact, never have those occasions where we are able to do otherwise. If cause and effect is a natural law which governs the universe and is never not the case, then any instance, whether we appear to slap somebody with our own hand or grabbed by somebody else to slap them with our hand, they are one and the same actions in the sense that they had to be the case, and there was no ability to do otherwise. And those are the two classical kind of poles. Now, of course, neither of those can be true, it seems to me. So the answer has to be somewhere in the middle, because both of those conceptions are riddled with difficulties. But we can get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say, now, aren't either of those poles, I mean, don't they really exist on a sort of spectrum? So the libertarian idea is that they're a true, pure, 100% notion of libertarian freedom or libertarian free will means that there cannot even be any sort of coercion whatsoever. So it has to be entirely spontaneous, that you could have chosen otherwise without any sort of external influence affecting your ability to make that decision, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so now the problem with that is obviously if I say, Troy, here's $1 billion, and I open up a briefcase and I say there are no strings attached, come over and grab this bag of $1 billion, you might say, oh yeah, I am free of my own volition to choose that bag of $1 billion and walk away with it. But really, you're being compelled from without by a system of signs and incentives that make you strive and desire that cash, right?
Yes.
And so that throws...
But libertarians would be fine with that.
Would they?
Oh, yeah. Because that's an external influence, but it's not a causal factor, is what they would say. So they'll admit of influences, but because they negatively define freedom as the ability to do otherwise, so it's a thing you didn't exercise, an ability you didn't exercise, then even if you have all these influences on the outside of you, you still had the ultimate spontaneous choice.
Right.
Regardless of your influences.
But what they don't understand is the power of influence and the power of ideology that determines, or not determines, that conditions one to make a choice. So that $1 billion is extremely valuable, and so it has a pull over me. And so I'm compelled from without because of the value, not just the value of the money, but the social value and the life value that is imbued within that money within a 21st century consumerist materialist culture, right? So it kind of throws a wrench in the idea that there is such a thing as pure libertarian freedom without coercion, because I am coerced by the system that makes me want to have a fucking billion dollars, and I want to get my boat.
Yeah, but do you even need that? I think that's almost making your job too difficult to refute libertarianism, even if you didn't want to go that far. My problem with libertarianism is, even if you have this spontaneous ability to make a choice, what is that? How does anything happen at all? Like, how are there ever effects to causes? Libertarians have to go back to, like, I hate using this term, but the analytics call it spooky metaphysics.
Okay.
But there's some Cartesian, like Descartes' idea of the cogito self that he wouldn't say hovers above you, but that's kind of how we conceive of it in our intuitions, that hovers above our bodies and pulls the puppet strings, right? But then that's talking in a cause and effect language about it. What then compels the cogito or the self or the soul or whatever it is you want to say is doing the causing to do those things? I mean, there has to be something there. It's not random. Like, people go to quantum mechanics and are like, there's indeterminism in quantum mechanics, so then here's our new spooky metaphysics. That's the thing that's where freedom resides. It's like, indeterminism doesn't solve your problem. Indeterminism just means randomness, and no one's saying choices are random. They're saying they're chosen. Choice by definition does not mean random. And so that begs a descriptor of, well, then what caused that? Which means you're going to have to go towards motives and character and experiences, all of which you could very easily explain as things that were themselves determined. So libertarianism for me is just incomprehensible and contradictory at its very roots. Like, what is doing the causing here? What is the choice? I don't think they really have an answer to that, other than we are all, like God in Aristotle's philosophy, uncaused causes, which that entire idea seems incoherent to me.
So you're kind of, I wonder if you're being really influenced by Lacan in your reading here, where rather than saying the subject speaks, it's the subject is spoken. So rather than saying the agent acts, it's the agent is sort of a part of this larger system that acts through the agent.
I wouldn't say that I'm presenting any positive notion yet. I would just point out that libertarianism itself has incoherency as its foundation.
Okay.
What is the thing doing the causing? If you're going to say that choices or free will is saved by randomness or indeterminism, that doesn't solve the problem for me, because randomness is not how anybody describes choice, nor does randomness get us the notion of moral responsibility, which is really at the heart of this question.
Yeah, and I think
we want to know, can we hold people responsible for their actions?
Exactly, and I think that's the whole point, right, is that it seems like that libertarianism is less valuable in itself and more valuable in what it's trying to do, as you described, as being a sort of foundation to enable culpability enable genuine responsibility within an ethical and political system. And if you somehow try to claim that you don't have absolute freedom over your choices, then how can you rightfully deem someone culpable for actions? And this goes to the heart of the theological question too, right? I mean, obviously our background started within theology, and so for me, my foray into studying free will and determinism and stuff like that came from the idea of, okay, so if God knows everything, then how does that impinge upon my ability to make my choices, and how am I still culpable for my actions? And then, of course, in the American contemporary evangelical Christian community, it is generally assumed that free will is extremely important so that you can be held accountable on the day of judgment.
Yeah, this is a really good test case, actually. Regardless of what someone's theological kind of background is, a test case for why I think libertarianism is incoherent. If you're going to judge somebody because they choose or don't choose to live a moral life, or in a more conservative evangelical sense, like accept Christianity or whatever, you hold them responsible for not doing it. How do you explain their choice not to do it? Is it random? Well, then you can't hold someone responsible for a random, indeterminate event. That goes against all of our notions. You wouldn't hold a person responsible if something, randomly happened and that they were involved in. You have to say that
they would argue that it's not random.
Yeah, so it's not indeterminate. It is determined by their sin nature, for instance.
Okay, some people would say that, but that'd be more leaning towards a sort of Calvinist perspective, right? Because the sort of traditional evangelical, I want to be careful with how I say it, I guess the contemporary evangelical position, the sort of like, you walk into your average church in America today, the way that it's going to be, I guess, structured is not going to be Calvinist, most likely. That's definitely a minority, I think, within the United States. That's pretty safe to say. But they would argue that, no, it's not determined by your sin nature, but that rather you do have that absolute freedom because God would never want to impinge upon your freedom, and he wants you to give the free choice, and therefore where the culpability lies is that everybody is given the free choice as the word of God is spread through evangelizing, right? And that's why they emphasize missions so much, because they want to make sure that they can get to everybody and give them that chance, that offer. Here's the $1 billion, take it or leave it, so to speak.
Here's the thing, though. The Calvinists, as morally repugnant as the notion of double predestination is, and it is, at least they're consistent, I feel like.
No, they are consistent.
If it's a choice, then it's determined by something. What is it determined by? Either your sin nature or God deciding to overwhelm your sin nature. That at least makes some sense in terms of explaining the cause and effect relationship of choices. The Arminian, who wants to claim that individuals all make the choice either for or against God or Christianity or the gospel or whatever, how do you explain that choice? Where does that choice come from? How can you talk about it other than using some cause and effect relationship? I feel like they just don't. They just ignore it. Could I explain someone's choice for or against the gospel as an effect of a combination of their childhood and their character and their brain activity and all these other determined factors that they had no choice in? I could. And then they would say, yeah, but on top of that, there was also some degree of spontaneous decision. What do you mean by spontaneous decision? I don't think there's a definition for that. It's just whatever else is there. It's like God of the gaps. There's a gap of spontaneous decision in every choice that's made. I don't know what that is, but it's whatever neuroscience and environment and character don't explain. Well, that's ever shrinking, that gap.
Right.
And if you can't give me something material that makes sense, even if it's not literally material, just something that makes sense of that, then that's not a real explanation.
Yeah, and the argument is just simply, well, we have the will. Again, they just kind of fall back on that. It's that will. It's the willpower, the power to choose. But they don't actually talk about what is that. Yeah,
what is that then? What makes that happen? I mean, it's like when we're talking about this
it's your own strength. It's your own strength. It's your own ability. And that's the kind of that's why you have to be committed to this weird blind notion of individualism, right? That I'm not influenced by those other things. That I have the power, I have the capacity to choose, and that's why there is such a hostility to certain findings in neuroscience and stuff like that. Like if you go to an evangelical church and you start talking about neuroscience, they think that's all cool and great until it kind of challenges this idea of that you have the absolute ability to make your decision or your choice.
Yeah, and so I mean, strength, willpower, character, none of those things are things that you cause. They're all, things you're not responsible for. So using other, character traits to explain what the will is, this decision-making, spontaneous decision-making item that we have in us is just, I don't think it's anything. it's just like a last grasp of trying to find ways to make people responsible for their evil actions or rewarded for their good ones. And so we have to posit, we have to do like a transcendental deduction where we posit there has to be something behind all the apparent things to make sense of the fact that we punish people who we think are bad and reward those who we think are good.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that is, I've kind of thought this for a long time, but that's why the West is still very Cartesian in its view of humanity, especially evangelicalism. I mean, it's becoming less and less so, but the evangelical Christian world, much of popular thought, I'll say, seems to function within this paradigm that we do have that, the transcendental ego, the thing behind the thing that is ultimately the determiner in how we make our decisions, and that's the thing that's strong enough, and they call it willpower, right, or the will, or something along those lines, and that's what's ultimately free. It is unchained, and it is uninfluenced by those other factors that would causally determine a choice or a decision within a given context.
Yeah, which of course in a philosophical sense is a terrible reason to believe in anything. Because you need it to justify the edifice you spent thousands of years building, which itself is questionably effective. I mean, more than questionably. It's totally ineffective.
Okay, so what you're suggesting, is that you're just simply creating a construct in order to justify your own bias. It's confirmation bias.
Yeah, I mean, but at least confirmation bias, you're finding some evidence to support your conclusion. You're just selectively confirming it. I mean, I think this is just creating an edifice underneath that you don't even require evidence for. It's trying to make coherent by multiplying causes, which obviously Occam's razor tells us that's never a good way to start off your theorizing.
Right. Well, so this is interesting because I think in the political landscape, though, this is part of the reason why there are so many people who have a hard time with like listening to structural critical analysis of racism or sexism or the influence of capitalism, right? Is because they don't want to they're incapable, really, but they don't have the tools or the skill set to analyze the other forces that affect human behavior. And so everything ultimately has to come down to the will, right? So much of the conservative logic, and I don't mean that if you are a conservative, but we'll say the logic that undergirds what would then influence someone to be conservative. Well, again, I'm talking about structural, right? We'll get there, I guess. But much of the conservative logic is conditioned by this presupposed belief in that radical free autonomous self or being or ego. And that's why when you start talking about structural analysis, it literally is like you're speaking a foreign language. And they just say there is no such thing as structural racism. There is no such thing as institutional racism because they don't understand the point. They don't really understand the argument. The argument isn't necessarily that the police force are all racists or that the police are all racists. That's not the point. Sure, that might be true, and I'm sure in instances that is true, but the argument is deeper than that. We're talking about the historical and structural ideological underpinnings that unconsciously condition our social behavior and our social actions, which then influence our individual actions and our individual behaviors. But that to them is literally a foreign language.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the conservative logic. That's the classic liberal logic.
That is the
entirely.
Right.
Of
You're
which
right.
the conservative logic is just one sort of byproduct. Yeah, I mean that's the entire history of the West and from nascent capitalism to today is the sovereign individual who makes their own choices.
And I think that's important to know because I think so many people get that confused. Liberalism is extremely important to understand, and that the conservative position is just an expression of liberalism, just in a sort of modified sense.
Yeah, it's just one expression of it.
Exactly.
It's one petal on the flower.
Okay.
I think it's that's a good way to transition to the determinism question.
Okay.
Because I think libertarianism is pretty clearly not going to work for whichever of those arguments you want to use.
But so many people believe it. I mean, so many people buy it.
Yeah, it's necessary to a lot of the other beliefs that we have. It's a central node in our epistemic web.
Yeah.
But I mean, if it's not true, then you kind of just got to get over it, right?
Yeah. So people get the fuck over it.
But the issue is determinism, for me at least, is just as incoherent. Maybe not as in its foundational sense as libertarianism is, but determinism being this idea that everybody. There are no such occasions where we could have done otherwise, and that cause and effect governs every event, such as to the point of everything we do and say is a direct effect of some previous cause, and if you follow that chain of causation all the way back, you get eventually to the Big Bang, in which case nothing can be free. When, the planets are orbiting around a star is this exact same action as me choosing to punch Austin in the face because he told me that he didn't like the new Danny Brown album that comes out in a couple of weeks. I don't know why I thought of that as an example, but if you didn't like the new Danny Brown album, I probably would have to punch you in the face.
Yeah. What is it? Atrocity Exhibition?
Yeah. Name drop. But anyway, we got from the tangent there. That idea of determinism, it makes more structural sense in the sense that, it explains what sort of decisions are, at the very least. It doesn't leave this spooky openness gap at the very foundation of its argument. But then at the top of the argument, like the top of the building, when it's trying to explain why or what things are happening, its actual explanatory force, it's like the weakest possible thing in the world. Like, it makes no sense to equate my decision to punch you in the face, which I would never do because I'm a pacifist and because I love you. But if I were to do that, explaining that as being the same as, the way gravity affects a rock when it falls, down a hill, like, there's no person that would accept those descriptions as being similarly explanatory. It's just ludicrous.
Well, what about when people, you oftentimes hear people talk about, oh, it's the lizard brain and stuff, and I like to joke around by it, right? Like, I'm a dude and I make a stupid decision because the lizard brain or the Neanderthal brain took over. So what do you think about that, though? Because that's really common in popular discourse, is that people want to blame it on their biology. It's like, oh, well, men just want to fuck, so obviously they're going to act a certain way. Or women, they just want to care about people. And so it's used for political and social means. And it seems that there's something dangerous about that, right? Like, if you just simply reduce everything to biology, that seems like there's something really, I don't know, kind of dark underneath it.
What are you getting at? What's the dark underbelly?
Well, okay. Well, for me, it's just because I'm an existentialist, and so I want there to be some level of agency, right? But if people are just simply cornered because of their biology, or if things are ultimately just reducible to biology, then that means that things can't be otherwise. And things just simply are fated within a particular direction. And first of all, I don't think that that's accurate. I think that if we look at things, we can look at the fact that human biology changes. We know from studies in cognitive science and neuroscience that the brain is plastic and that literally does function in different ways under different conditions. But I think the thing that's dark underneath it is that if you just say, well, men, they just want to fuck, and so then they're going to treat women a certain way, it, one, means that there's no other option, and two, it sort of is a justification for it. It justifies it. And people use this in court cases, right? With, like, serial killers. Oh, well, it's the person was biologically predisposed, therefore they cannot be punished in the same way if libertarian freedom were the case, where then a person is entirely culpable. So this seems to go in the opposite direction. Rather than having entire legal or political frameworks based on whether or not a person is culpable or responsible for his actions based on freedom, now it's, well, a person is exonerated because they could not do otherwise, and so they had to do that. And that seems to set a very dangerous precedent. If women are just biologically predisposed to be childbearers, well, didn't a bunch of fucking misogynists historically use that to argue that's why women shouldn't vote? Yeah, black people, they're inferior. This is biologically predisposed. God damn it, that's what Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species kind of sort of in its original context, one of the things it sort of implied, right? Well, shit, it's on the fucking original cover, the preservation of favored races. And it's this idea of trying to use biology to justify political power structures, and that's why it's dark and dangerous.
Okay, well, shouldn't we first separate the pseudoscience from the science there?
Yeah, sure.
Like, yes, it's dark and sinister to use biology to justify racism. It's also pseudoscience. Like, it's not correct usage of science. It's just inaccurate. Whereas it could be accurate that a serial killer had such and such a brain state due to various experiences and biology and the size of the neocortex or whatever, or the amygdala, whatever it is. I don't even remember all the parts of the brain.
I think it is the amygdala. That's where the aggression is, right?
That's one of the things. Yeah, neocortex is like self-control, right?
I believe so.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Diane is going to yell at us for whatever we're saying here.
Yeah.
Those could be, and we're not exactly sure quite yet, but those could be pretty good explanatory measures for telling us why people do certain actions. Now that's the real question, right? If we can explain actions purely through biology and the gap of things we can't explain shrink to the point where it's basically gone, then how does that change the way that we treat other people?
Well, but it doesn't... like, if someone has an overinflated amygdala, that isn't the sole causal factor, right? This is a problem with the scientific reductionism, is that it's conflating. It is overly simplistic in its reductionism. Because, yeah, so if someone does have an overinflated amygdala and therefore produce a certain type of chemical that could lead to aggression, aggression is an expression of something else. Aggression there isn't like a one-to-one necessary, like causal connection between, certain chemicals in the brain being released and me punching somebody in the face. The chemicals that are released in the brain lead to other expressions, and then because of certain social conditioning, then I want to punch somebody in the face. But I can use that aggression in other ways. You can channel that energy into different avenues, right? But because of certain social conditioning or certain social contexts, then it's going to manifest itself as me punching a kid on the playground or something like that.
So you're saying internal conditioning, such as biology, stuff like that, plus external conditioning,
yes,
social conditioning, environment, equals action.
Yeah, and I think
that's still determinism,
and
right?
it's even more complex than that. Yeah, I'm okay with some level of determinism as long as we also recognize that there's also a level of freedom and agency within that determinism. So it's a conditioned freedom, or a determined freedom.
Where is the freedom then?
What's up?
Where's the freedom then? If internal conditioning plus external conditioning equals action, where's the room for freedom in there?
Well, so not to get too theoretical, but Sartre actually has this really nice way of describing it, and he calls it. He says that there's a gap between the sort of interiorization and exteriorization. So there's a small gap that when I am externally conditioned by the same set of social forces as you, my particular unique contracted experience of all of those social forces based on the sort of physical location of my body, the historical different types of food that I've eaten, the various different experiences that I've had. Even though you and I do experience the same social pressures, those individual factors are going to create an individual complex network of capacities or possibilities within me than you. And that's where the freedom lies. It's the ability to function differently or to respond differently than you would have, because the massive complex of influences are different in me than they are in you, and in Sally, and in Joe, and in Dr. Moraine, or whatever the fuck her name is, or, then all these various different people around the world are going to have their own unique contracted experience with the conditioning, both internal and external, based on their individual biologies, their genetic history, the food that they take, their health factors, the weird mutations of the genes within them, as well as the social experiences that they've had that are very different. The fact that you and I can walk down the street, but you're on the left side and I'm on the right side, that itself creates a unique situation for me as opposed to you. And then if you magnify that unique location and that example to infinity based on the infinite different experiences we have, then that's where the individuality comes in and the uniqueness comes in my ability to make a choice that is different than yours. So that's why it's not just pure determinism.
And why can't I explain all of that through the internal conditioning?
What do you mean? Like, why isn't it just all reducible to biology?
So if I'm a hardcore determinist and reductionist, why can't I just say, given two people, A and B, and both A and B have the exact same external social conditioning, so they have the exact same environment, education, parents, whatever, the difference in their choices and actions would apparently be the exercising of their own personal freedom.
Well, the problem is there is no such thing as the exact same external set of conditions.
Just theoretically.
But
hypothetically, I mean.
Well, but hypothetically, sure, if that were the case, then there would have to be some other determining factor, and it would probably come down to individual biology. But that hypothetical situation doesn't inhere within reality, because there are no such things as the exact same social sets. So say you and I, right now, we're sitting in this room where I'm currently sitting right now. You and I, at that moment, are experiencing in some ways the same social conditioning. There are certain social external factors that are impinging upon us at the same time in the same way. But only a couple things. At the same time, there are billions of other external factors that are impinging upon us in different ways, based on your different history and my different history and your different experience of things yesterday. So in a given moment, and this is what we could talk about in philosophy. They talk about like synchronic, right? In the structural moment instead of diachronic, which is historical. So synchronic, in the moment, there are these sort of vertical. I'm making this motion with my hand that Troy can see, but the listeners can't see. I'm like vertical, right?
It's very sexy.
Yes, it is. The vertical experiences of the structures that are impinging upon us, the religious expectations, the political expectations, the linguistic structures that we are inheriting that are conditioning our conversation right now. Those things are similar, but the degree or the intensity with which those things impinge upon my given body versus your given body versus her given body versus their given bodies, etc., are all going to always be different based on the entire historical accumulation of those things, as well as the biological conditioning that influences things as well. So there's this massive complex network of relations between the sort of structural influences within a given moment, as well as the historical influences, as well as the biological influences. Does that make sense? Is that too abstract? I feel like I'm not being clear.
I guess I'm just not seeing where freedom is in that, or any sense of freedom. I feel like a reductionist would just say, well, yeah, okay, that's fine. No one can have the exact same set of social conditioning, and their experience of that makes it different of necessity, because they are a unique individual, at the very least. But sure, but then I'll still say that all the conditioning, external and internal together, is the full and satisfactory explanation of what they do, and that there is no freedom. I'm not sure where is the freedom in that equation.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Well, and so I guess at this point, then there would have to be some. I'll be honest, I don't know. I need to think through this, because the way that I would think of it now is that there is some sort of shift, but what is it that describes that shift? There is some sort of shift or spark that initiates a sort of eruption from within the external factors that allows for a different trajectory or a different course to be followed, rather than just simply following those conditions that are prescribed from outside, right? There has to be some way to describe what that spark would be.
Well, let me give you a thought experiment and see if maybe we're on the right track, but on different wavelengths. Sorry to mixaphorically speaking.
Mixaphorical.
To quote from O Brother Art, though. I've always wanted to use that on a podcast. So you have two individuals that are both like murderers. They're killers.
Okay.
One of them is clinically insane. And so the psychiatrist that's employed by the DA determines that this person, through their biology, their neurology, the various experiences they've had, the fact that it's been untreated for many, many years, whatever, that's the most important causal factor in why they killed this person.
Okay.
They were paranoid and thought the person was the devil and was trying to take them to hell. And so they killed the person. And another person who, they killed someone because that person cut them off on the road, and they followed them home for 30 minutes and went into their house and, killed them. So there was some level of deliberation that's involved there. It's not just, like a pure fit of passionate rage or anything. They took time to think about it, and they had time to calm down, but didn't. Whatever. Now, in a court of law, you would clearly determine one would be murder, and that person would, go to jail, and the other person would need psychiatric help, and so they'd go to a mental institution, right? The question is, philosophically speaking, is there really any difference between those two? Or are they both perfectly explainable through their biology and neurology, and possibly social conditioning externally as well? Clearly, no one would accept that those are exactly the same, right? Or that they're parallel.
Right.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so.
Only the reductionist would say, via this scientific reasoning and knowledge that we have, they are parallel. But basically, nobody else would. Now, the question is, are our intuitions that those two things are not the same, are not parallel, are those intuitions justified? The reductionist would say they're not justified, because really all the things we think person B had, who deliberated, that deliberation process itself is a neurological correlate and was a byproduct of their upbringing and their conditioning and their biology and everything else. In the same way, or in a similar way, as the insane person who just killed someone because they thought that they were the devil who was going to take them to hell. They're basically the same. Now, is that reductionism justified? I guess is the real question. And it seems to me there's an important difference between those two.
And what is the important difference?
It wouldn't be freedom, right? It wouldn't be one person had a spontaneous, spooky decision to do a thing, and the other person didn't.
It wouldn't be libertarian freedom.
Right, it wouldn't be that.
Yeah, and that I'm okay with. Yeah, that's fine.
For me, it just seems like the important difference between those two is a sort of, via the social conditioning, a sort of buffet of options. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm assuming person B went to school and was inculcated in various classes that in some way taught, like, social etiquette and manners, and had been cut off before, and had heard of the phenomenon of being cut off, and had been told by many people, including hopefully their parents and school teachers and friends, that you're a douchebag if you freak the hell out and give disproportionate punishment for a crime, of which killing someone because they cut you off would be disproportionate. And they themselves felt it was unjustified when other people gave them disproportionate punishments for things they did. And that all those experiences together laid out a buffet of options. And so they had the option to freak the hell out and kill somebody, or they had the option to just let it go and everything in between. And because they were, through social conditioning, given those options, we would say they were, in a sense, more free to make their decision. More free. Not capital F free, but more free in that sense. Whereas the insane person, we would say, by virtue of the fact that they clearly had no other options, the psychiatry explains the fact that this was, in a sense, the overwhelming option available to them, and they didn't have the social conditioning necessary to give them that buffet of options, or even if they did, it wouldn't be effective because of their neurology. That therefore we would say that they weren't free, or were less free. And so we would say, put them in a mental institution because they don't deserve pure capital R responsibility for their actions. But person B, in some sense, is blameworthy. Now, does that mean you should throw them in jail forever because retributive punishment is effective? I think we'd both say probably not.
No.
But they're at least more free in that sense, but not libertarian free in the sense that this social conditioning gave them more options.
Okay, yeah, I'm cool with that. I think going back to your question towards me, then what I would say in light of the example that you just proposed is that I am not interested in any way of trying to retain some notion of libertarian freedom. Right? That's done for me. For me, freedom means something different. Freedom means the ability to transform your material environment. You are free within conditions that are not of your own choosing. And it's your ability to select from the buffet of options. Now, your ability to do so is determined to greater and lesser degrees based on a massive complex of internal and external conditionings, historical conditionings, etc. But, nevertheless, that's what freedom is for me. It's contextualized freedom. It's conditioned freedom. And if you want to use freedom with a small f, then that's what it means. And I have no interest in trying to preserve some notion of libertarian freedom. I'm totally cool with admitting the fact that the ideological substructures that underpin my decision-making and that the biological conditionings of my particular makeup affect and largely influence how I'm going to respond to the buffet of options that I'm presented with. I'm totally cool with that.
Okay. I think the key would be, when you're talking about when someone, does something morally blameworthy, like they're a douchebag or whatever, you explain that by saying, the reason why I find what you did blameworthy is because, given your upbringing and the fact that your biology is, as far as we know, not all, jacked up,
right,
that you in other cases this was the wrong thing to do, and yet you did it anyway, and to say what caused you to do that, and then to sort of have that person reflect and think about and gestate over the issue, and to then use that experience to condition them to not do those things in the future. The very fact we can know that we're conditioned is the kind of the key here, right? The fact you can know this means you can reflect on it and then set yourself up for further decisions. I mean, it's kind of like, the fact that you dwell on certain issues and say, you know what, I don't know what I would do if I saw someone trying to hurt someone else in the street. Like, would I run? Would I call the police? Would I help them? Whatever. No one can know what they're going to do until it actually happens, right? But what you can do is think about it even before it's happened and dwell on it, and then sort of mull over it And that, in a sense, does prepare you to do what's right when you come across that situation. That's freedom. I mean,
Right.
it's not capital F freedom,
Right.
but it's a way in which we can sort of grab a hold of our conditioning and mold it. We can't
Yes.
choose what the conditioning is. We're given, like you said, the Marx quote. You know, we grow up, or men act, but not in the conditions of their own choosing, whatever it is.
Yep, it's close enough.
That's an apt metaphor for free will as well, right? Because we're not sort of choosing the vast majority of things that condition us, but we can sort of mold those things in different ways.
Well, and this
in
is
preparation.
Exactly, and this is what's so important about the history of, I guess you could call it dialectical materialism or materialist philosophy. Not materialism in that you're trying to like accumulate Versace watches and shit like that, but the philosophical materialism is that what it's sought to do is put power back into human beings' hands in light of the fact that they are conditioned by external factors. And the way that you do that is really, it's a two-pronged approach. It might be more complex than this, but at least it's a two-pronged approach. And it's through the transformation of the human itself. What does it even mean to be human? Through the transformation of the social structures that condition the human, which includes the biological conditionings as well. And now that we understand neuroplasticity and the fact that biology is transformable, we understand that we actually are creating ourselves and that we can continue to create ourselves and recreate ourselves in different ways, in ways that will enable us to respond, more equitably or to develop different higher ethical social orders. And I think that's the real philosophical implication here, that really this type of philosophy is ultimately aiming at, is it is aiming at creating better ethical social situations. And it does that by recognizing that there is an element of external conditioning and internal conditioning, and that we can kind of unravel those things or reshape them or set the trajectories in ways that will be more profitable or that will be more inclined towards human flourishing, whatever that means or whatever that looks like.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess kind of to wrap things up, libertarian freedom is the idea that you are absolutely free without any sort of external factors coercing you. Not that there are no influences, but they just don't think that those influences somehow affect your ability to choose between different options.
Or internal factors. Also.
Or internal factors, okay. Which seems really naive. And it's so strange. I feel like that... Let's just talk about the West, but I feel like with American and UK, and I'm sure you see this also in France and Germany too, but I'm not as familiar with the ideology of the continent. But definitely the UK and America, I feel like there's like a weird contradiction. Like people want to embrace human biology and determinism, and at the same time still try to hold on to this idea of like voluntaristic libertarian freedom. It's really weird, isn't it?
What's the sense in which they want to take on determinism? What are you referring to there?
Just that you hear people that are like, well, it's just, it's our biology, or they want to, like, quote fucking Sam Harris or something like that, but then at the same time still maintain, even though he's, like, a hardcore determinist, I think, but they still want to, like, maintain some level of freedom. So you have, it seems like, this weird contradiction where both viewpoints are espoused quite popularly in the social and political discourses, but that there's not much discussion about how they are actually really conflictual, and that there needs to be some sort of other way of actually discussing these two philosophical ideals.
Yeah, I feel like in America, at least, the popular discussion is always determinism makes sense of everything else but me.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll use it for explaining the Trump phenomenon, and I'll use it to explain why my, boyfriend or girlfriend left me or whatever. But when it comes to me, no, I'm entirely spookily free.
Exactly, right? Yeah, like you'll hear the sort of thing, oh, well, guys are just assholes. They just can't help it. They just want to procreate, and they just can't help it. But then at the same time, that same person in the same breath will, exactly like you said, exempt themselves from the biological determinism. Or that people are only determined when it comes to sex. It's like, well, that's just how men are. And women, they just want to, like, nurture because that's just biological, Like, they just make babies, and so they just nurture. And so people will use that type of rhetoric while at the same time trying to retain other situations or other notions of freedom within different contexts. And it's this weird contradiction. There's a real inconsistency there, which is kind of, I don't know, it just popped into my head. But anyway, okay, so wrapping it up, libertarian freedom, dumb. Determinism, dumb. Conditioned freedom.
This would be a paper in in some philosophical journal.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that would not make it through the peer review process.
Shit, whatever. Fuck it.
Fuck it. Fuck freedom. Yeah. So how would you, I guess, in a pithy statement, how would you sum up what you think the issue is? If someone came up to you and said, hey, let's talk about freedom and free will. What is freedom?
I'd be like, nah.
Nah. I'd rather watch a movie instead.
Yeah, I mean, just the entire discussion's like, come on, man. Just, like, think more.
Yeah.
It's obviously not either of those two. They don't fit. They don't make sense of anything that we do. And so it's clearly compatibilism, some combination of the two. And it's just the way we use our knowledge to talk about things. Yeah, cause and effect governs everything. Socially, biologically, the confluence of all these things. Talk about it. Think about it. Think about also how it affects you and all the things you do. And then make better choices.
And then think about how we can respond better to those causal determinations that are influencing us.
Yeah, yourself, the social structures, your prison system, rehabilitation, everything. How you treat people, all that stuff.
Fucking A.
Like, there's no Buddhist out there who's like, everything's actually empty, so just fuck it.
Right.
No, it's like, yeah, everything's actually empty, and so they have this kind of strong determinism at the bottom of things. But then it's like, don't be a dick. Like, help people and stuff. And that actually kind of flows neatly from it. There's no, they don't like freak out about the whole free will thing. It's only us that do that.
So is that the title of this? Is that the title of this episode? There is no freedom, but don't be a dick and help people.
I'm cool with that. It's just called "Don't Be a Dick."
Don't be a dick. Yeah. All right. Well, there you go. Wise words from Troy. Put it on a bumper sticker. Don't be a dick. All right, so moving on to our next segment is the Sticky Leaves segment, where this week Troy will be explaining what it is that is giving him meaning in a world that is often viewed as devoid of meaning. Troy, what is your sticky leaf or leaves for this week?
All right, so my sticky leaves, usually I want to bring up something kind of esoteric that other people wouldn't know about. This may or may not be true this week. I'm not really sure.
Okay.
But I kind of had to because it's the only thing that mattered as far as that was good, that was great, that was to be held up and esteemed this week. And that is the new FX show, Atlanta. It is so good. I mean, we could talk for episodes about how great the show is. But I just wanted to bring up one basic selling point that for me makes it great art. And one of the few kind of television shows you could really call arts. Usually, we separate genres of media, especially in like film and drama narratives, into comedy, drama, and et cetera, all the subgenres of those things, right? This show is completely uncategorizable. Like, at one point, it's very clearly a comedy. It's a 24-minute, show, and it has the beats of a comedy, so it's structured in that way. And it's hilarious, too. I mean, when you watched it, we were talking about the one scene, and it's the first or second episode, since they went together, where Donald Glover's character is in jail, and he's awaiting sort of to be his charges and to get bail posted and stuff. And there's a guy hitting on a transgender girl, very clearly transgender, and the guy doesn't seem to realize it when he's hitting on her, and so
it's his ex-girlfriend too.
Oh yeah, and it's his ex-girlfriend. So they had a relationship before.
Yeah.
And apparently he didn't realize it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was a celibate relationship or whatever. And the other guys in the jail start, referencing the fact that she's transgender and that he must be gay secretly. And he gets all upset about it. And so there's this gay bashing back and forth. And then in the middle of it, Donald Glover just kind of makes the point that, sexuality is a spectrum. So really it's just, everyone just ignores that.
Yeah.
And just keeps railing insults that are extremely homophobic at the guy. It's just this hilarious moment in the midst of what could have been super racy and everything else, and just really releases all the tension you have when watching this scene. It was so perfectly placed. At the same time, it's very clearly a drama. Like, it's heavier than almost any other drama I think you can see on TV. There's in that same scene, or the next scene in that same setting, there's a guy in the jail who's clearly schizophrenic, and and the guard has said that he's been here a lot. He's here all the time. He starts drinking out of the toilet, and kind of freaking out, unable to control his reactions. And everyone's just kind of laughing. Oh yeah, he's here all the time. And Donald Glover's character is just like, well, doesn't that mean he needs like help? Mm-hmm. And then the guy kind of runs into one of the guards, and then the guards beat the shit out of him. And it's so dark. Oh my god, it was like you cringe watching it. Mm-hmm. And that was right after, I think, the sexuality is a spectrum joke. And it's so easily able to move between incredible darkness and, comedically uplifting stuff like that. At the same time, even on top of it, because we have lots of, dramedies or dark comedies or, deep comedies or whatever you want to call them. It's also like surrealistic.
Yeah.
There's one scene in the first episode where Donald Glover's on a bus and he starts talking to a guy who looks like Malcolm X with his like suit and tie and the whole thing.
Yeah, the bow tie.
And he's making a sandwich with Nutella on the bus while he's giving sagely advice to Donald Glover. It's the weirdest fucking thing ever. It's totally straight out of David Lynch, Twin Peaks.
And then he says, like, eat this sandwich. And Donald Glover's like, no, I'm cool. And he's like, you don't eat this sandwich. And you're like, what the fuck? And then all of a sudden, the camera like pans away so you can't. So he's framed out. The guy that was making the sandwich is framed out. And then it comes back, and he's gone. And you think, oh, he just disappeared. It was a figment of his imagination. But then the camera goes to the like an exterior of the bus shot, and it's the dude walking away with this dog. And you're like, what
into the forest.
Into the forest. You're like, what the fuck? Yeah. And then, of course, I think that probably harkens back to the opening scene. Remember Darius? Is that his name, Darius?
Yeah, the guy who played Snoop.
Yeah, that guy. Yeah, Darius. So he kind of says they're in this confrontation in a parking lot, and he's like, whoa, I'm getting the craziest deja vu. He's like, where's that dog? And he like turns away, and there's this dog, and you're like, okay, wait, what do you mean deja vu? What the fuck? So now you're curious, like, what is this? And then that same dog was the dog that was following this dude into the woods. You're like, what the fuck? So, yeah, it's crazy, man.
And it's not just randomly put in there to be cool and surrealistic and Lynchian. It's like, this is what Atlanta's like, is what they're saying. Because it happens all throughout the show. Atlanta is just fucking weird. It's just part of the character of the town, which is why, it has the nomenclature. It's Atlanta. So it's wonderful. Just watch it. It's enjoyable. It'll make you cringe. It'll make you laugh. It'll make you cry. It'll make you question the meaning of life. Everything.
Yeah, I'm going to have to say that, like, you kind of sticky leafed me prior to this episode of Sticky Leaves, and I started watching it this week, and yeah, dude, I'm hooked. So, I think the 4th episode comes out this week, right?
Yeah, is it a Tuesday show? Like Tuesday or Wednesday or something.
Oh, is it? I thought it was Sunday. Oh, shit, I don't know.
I don't watch anything live, so I don't know what day
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, well. But it's on FX, so...
Yeah, watch that shit. Support Donald Glover. It's good. It's so niche, though, I'm kind of worried it's not going to last super long. So go, please support it. All 12 of you. It'll make a huge difference. All right, for our next segment, we're going to do some bullshitting, which is where Austin and I just straight up bullshit about a topic that we're not too familiar with, and that's trending. This week, that happens to be the Emmys, which are, as we're recording this, about to happen, and by the time you're hearing this, probably have happened. So we're not going to be remarking on who the awards were given to. One, because we're not clairvoyant, and two, because we don't give a shit.
Very true.
I'm guessing, for the most part.
I don't give a shit.
Yeah, so what's with the Emmys, Austin?
The Emmys... You know what the Emmys needs? It needs a comedian...
Substance,
or it needs a
reason?
comedian to just take the piss. So Ricky Gervais should host every awards show ever and just mock the whole process of Hollywood awards shows and shit like that forever. That's what it needs. It needs a little bit of levity. It takes itself way too fucking serious, man.
Okay, here's my issue though. Mocking or mockery doesn't do anything to actually challenge the status quo. So like, award shows are known for hosts that specialize in mockery, and the opening monologue is always just mocking the various celebrities, and then proceeds to like esteem them greatly for acting.
Yeah, but that's why Ricky Gervais is. Have you seen his hosting at the Golden Globes?
I mean, no.
Oh, dude, it's different. It's very different. Like, he literally criticizes the entire structure of the Hollywood game. And I think because he's British and things are different over here, the way that they run things, and I think it's because he's just a brutal comedian, for one, and he just doesn't give a fuck. He really did raise a lot of controversy in the way that he hosted the Golden Globes. You should check that out. Like literally making fun of the Hollywood Foreign Press, who's the body that determines who wins a Golden Globe Award. Literally, basically talking about how all you had to do was buy them off, or like go on vacation. With it, like he would, like people were, like movie studios were offering incentives for people of the Hollywood Foreign Press to hang out with Johnny Depp and Angelina Jolie, and that's the only reason that The Tourist got nominated. Like, he would say shit like that, which, you know, that's a pretty subversive thing to say, especially in a room of people that take themselves very seriously and take these awards very seriously. He's pointing out the fact that this is just a bunch of bullshit, and really it's just about who has money and who has influence, and that's who is ultimately going to determine who gets nominated for awards, because The Tourist was fucking awful. And it should not have been nominated. So, in that sense, it's kind of interesting.
Okay, I wonder though if that kind of more cynical attitude doesn't just get reinforced right back into the status quo again.
Of course it does.
Because I mean, I would like that better than someone who comes out and just, like, you know, prostrates himself before Brad Pitt and kisses his feet or whatever. But I don't know that it does anything to actually affect the world in a significant way. Which, I mean, we're not expecting the Emmys to come out and, like, affect the world in a great way.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Obviously. But, I don't know that it's some kind of, like, radically free act or anything. It's not like, you know, self-immolating in a farmer's market to protest rising of food prices or something.
Right. Hey, did you
that would be badass. If Ricky Gervais just walked on stage and self-immolated live on television, like, he makes a contract, which we have to do this live.
Yeah.
Right? And I swear I won't swear, so they have to do it live, no, like, you know, 5 seconds to pause, and just, like, lit himself on fire. Now that would be a less than cynical and truly radically free act.
So is this what you're calling upon for hosts from award shows to do? To light themselves on fire on the stage?
Can I be found guilty of a crime for
I think so.
that?
Yeah, I think so.
So I'm not going to suggest that then. But I'm putting it out there.
I'm putting it out there. Yeah. All right. Did you ever see that episode of It's Always Sunny where they basically take the piss out of the entire award system? Where it's like the gang gets nominated for Best Bar, or I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's about them they want to get nominated for the Best Bar. Did you ever see that episode?
I remember the episode, but I don't remember what happened.
Oh, well, so the idea is that the whole show is basically a piss take on the fact that It's Always Sunny has never been nominated for an Emmy, even though it's one of the most popular shows on television and one of the best shows on television as well, right? Just critically acclaimed, fans as well. But it's never been nominated. And so basically what they do is they say, is it us? Is it us? Like, them as characters. They're like, is it us? Is that... Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't set it up. So in the episode, the gang is trying to figure out how they can get their bar nominated as, like, the best bar in Philadelphia or something like that. There's this award that happens every single year, but their bar is always passed over, and Patty's Pub never actually makes it, you know? And so they're like, what the fuck, man? Why doesn't Patty's Pub ever get nominated? It's got to be us. Is it us? Like, are we just not likable? Is that what it is? And so they're like, well, let's go look at last year's winner. And so they go into this bar, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically like, think perfect sitcom lighting with the characters, the bartenders behind the bar, have like these almost like pre-structured, super cheesy sitcom lines that they, you know, give, and they're super likable and they're really nice looking. And then, of course, there's like a romantic relationship. There's like a tension between these two bartenders. And it's like, oh, Alice, you know, and it's like the typical tropes that you see in the popular sitcoms. And so they come into this bar and they're like, what the fuck? Like, these people are dumb. But then they start to like it. And they're like, shit, that's what we got to do. So then they try to go back to their bar and copy that so that they can be more favorable to the, you know, nominating body, whoever it is. And so that they can get their bar nominated. But then, of course, shit goes crazy, as it always does. And because they're horrible human beings or horrible characters, they, of course, ruin their bit at trying to be polished, quote-unquote, sitcom material. And it's really funny, but the whole thing is literally a piss take on the Emmy process. And it's fucking hilarious. You should check it out, again, if you haven't.
Yeah, that's actual satire. That's the difference, right? It's not mockery.
Exactly.
And so, in that sense, that kind of makes you readjust and rethink what you think about giving awards to art in general.
Yeah.
And it's actual sort of what makes valuable art valuable, right? It's challenging, and it's different, and it's unique.
Yeah.
And that causes people to look at the Emmys and go like, that's some bullshit.
But I don't know. People get fucking obsessed, man. They love it. Like, they want to know what gown is this person wearing, and what tux is that person wearing, and who did this person come with? Oh my God, they're together, and I don't know, man. It's fucking weird. It's really weird.
Well, that's a whole different thing, right? That's just like enjoying the voyeurism of celebrity culture, which, like, you know, that's not destructive towards anything. But the actual idea of giving awards to art seems to me to be destructive to the artistic process.
You don't
have
think
the same thing in higher education, right? Where you have to publish or perish. You have to follow certain rules for publishing and not do anything challenging and original, or else people are going to dismiss it. And that creates an academic sort of environment where no one does anything original and everything sucks. It's kind of the same in television and movies, right? The really challenging, new, original stuff oftentimes gets dismissed.
Right.
That said, Mr. Robot should win everything tonight. Just putting that out there.
Yeah, I know, right? It's fucking so good, man. I haven't seen the second season yet, though, so...
Oh, bro.
Does it get even crazier?
Yeah, the first half, you'll be a little confused.
Okay.
But for good reason. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay. Yeah, well, it gets even worse, though, because in giving awards to the arts, if it were some sort of, whatever this even means, objective process where you judged the merits of something, that'd be one thing. But these award systems are so fucking distorted anyway, because it's all about who has money and who has influence behind the scenes. So it's just, and we watch it like, oh, these are the whoever these determining bodies are determining who the best actors are on TV and shit like that. No, they're not. I mean, not really. It's based on this weird confluence of who's popular, based on who's trending, based on who's at what, TV studio, and which production companies have say, and which producers and showrunners are the ones who are actually kind of influencing the decisions. And I don't know, man, all these shows, they're just fucking ridiculous. Or not the shows, but like the Emmy shows and Golden Globes and Oscars and shit like that.
Yeah, the justifications given for giving certain awards to people are so weird, just as an argument. I mean, it's always like, this person's had a huge body of work and they deserve one, even if this particular project didn't sort of beat the other ones, as if you could quantify that anyway. Or this person's so young, they're going to have so many opportunities to win. Let the person who has been working as a character actor like J.K. Simmons for so many years, they should win because he was in a movie where he yelled at a guy a lot, which is a great movie. I loved Whiplash.
Brilliant.
And he's a great actor. He's super fun. I love him. But just the argument itself is so weird.
I know. I feel it. Well, that's what happened with Leo this year, right? When he won there this past year with Revenant. He finally won, and everyone's like, finally, Leo wins. And so many people are like, well, it was less for the Revenant and more for his career and his body of work and shit like that. And it's kind of like... And it was so
nobody liked the Revenant. Nobody did. You liked a couple of the tracking shots because they were beautiful, and the rest of it was hell. Everybody knows this.
But he ate bison meat, raw bison meat.
Yeah, I know, that's the thing, right? If male actors do things that they don't have to do just for the sake of being difficult, they deserve awards for that. And if women make themselves look ugly when actually they're beautiful, then they deserve awards for that.
Charlize Theron.
That's the major trump for getting an award, yeah.
Exactly. I know. Well, so fucking awards shows are dumb. With that said, I'm probably going to see who the winners were tomorrow.
Yeah, I still want to know. I mean, just for the fact that, if Mr. Robot wins awards, that means they'll probably get more funding and guarantee having the longer stay, as long as, the creators want them to go, which is what's important to me. And
it makes for good water cooler talk so that people don't think I'm totally an alien. I got to have my pop culture knowledge so that I'm not too much of a sort of weird creature walking around the world.
That's your problem, bro. You should just walk around with Critique of Dialectical Reason all marked up, and just, even when you're walking, like, be opening, reading it, running into people. And you can run into them at the bus queue and be like, this is especially ironic. And they won't get it.
Yeah. But Troy, you don't understand. I desire external validation by human beings too much. Damn it.
With first-class legroom, free cocktails for everyone, and a schedule you can depend on.
All right, it is that time. We are going to be throwing it over to Michael O. Burns for This Week in Hip Hop. I actually want to, one day, I want to get his thoughts on Atlanta, because obviously the TV show is all about, becoming a hip hop artist in Atlanta. And I would really love it. I don't know if he's going to talk about it this week, but at some point, I would love to hear his thoughts on Atlanta. Tweet me, bro.
Hell yeah.
Hey, what's what's up? This is Michael Burns with This Week in Hip Hop on Owls at Dawn. Apologies, the recording quality isn't as good as normal. I'm back to a more minimal setup this week, but I'll be back with the hi-fi audio for you next week. Good week in hip hop for the most part. Best thing that happened is Mac Miller's record came out. It's called The Divine Feminine, and it's surprisingly good. It's sonically really cohesive. And there's some really good work on it. Robert Glasper's on it. There's some really good production on the record. A lot of good kind of jazzy, subtle sound. And you can kind of hear that influence of that Soulection type sound with the production. Mr. Miller himself alternates between rapping and singing and kind of being halfway between those two a lot on the record. It's a very sexual album. And that's cool. It makes me feel a little uncomfortable sometimes, but that's fine. I'm not in touch with my sexuality and those desires, but that's not your problem. That's my problem. Standout tracks for me, Dang, which we talked about before. It's the first single that came out with Anderson .Paak on it. My favorite track on the record is this one called Planet Goddamn. Really, really good track, kind of glitchy production. It's really dope. And then the final track on the 10-song album is called God is Fair, Sexy, Nasty. Features Kendrick Lamar and uses Kendrick in a really interesting way. I think that the expectation would be Kendrick might come on and spit a kind of technical rapid fire verse, but instead he's kind of singing. He's on hook duty. He's providing some more sonic qualities using his voice. But it's really good. I definitely recommend checking the record out, and I really think Mac Miller is kind of found his form. The last two projects have been really good, but this is a really, really great project, and it's always good to have a nice 10-song album rather than something that drags for too long. Building on from last week's podcast, where I just talked to you about the Cool Kids, new song out. First new Cool Kid song in quite some time. It's called Running Man. It's available on all the streaming services, and it's good. Really hard, kind of aggressive. Definitely sounds like they're kind of coming back and punching you in the mouth right away to remind you that they're still fucking here. I recommend listening to it. It's definitely not... I wouldn't put it in my top 5 Cool Kid songs ever, but it's really solid for a comeback track. So I'm really excited to see what they have going. They're doing their first performance in years this weekend. So fingers crossed that maybe their first performance is a time to drop some more music on us. Who knows? In terms of history, because we like history on this podcast, today is the 10-year anniversary of Lupe Fiasco's debut record, Food and Liquor. And I don't know if that was something that you were onto when it first came out, but man, that was something. And when Lupe first came on the scene, this was before the Chicago rap scene had really blown up the way it is right now. We only heard him for the first time on Testify with Kanye. Famously, Kanye turned down Lupe's vocals on that song because he didn't want his voice to sound as good as Kanye's did. But man, I listened to that again today, and it really holds up. You could put out Food and Liquor today, and that is just a dope hip-hop record. So if you haven't listened to that in a while, and I know Lupe can be a divisive figure, but going back to Food and Liquor just reminds us that he's just a really dope MC, both conceptually and stylistically. He's had some weird issues in his career, but thank God we have him. I'm glad that we have Lupe. In terms of stuff that's coming out soon, we finally got news today that No Worries, and that's no spelled NX, I know it doesn't make sense, but No Worries, which is the group featuring producer Knowledge and an Anderson .Paak, they put out some songs together that you've probably loved, and if you didn't love them, it's because you didn't hear them, because when you hear them, you'll love them. But their album's coming out on Stone's Throw, October 21st. They put a single out today. It's called Yes Loud. And I'm not trying to be racist or weird or fucking corny, but it's Yes, L-A-W-D. And I think it's meant to be said with a certain emphasis. But it's good. It's sexy. Kind of a nasty song. This is weird. I'm not a very sexual person, but I'm talking about the Mac Miller record, which is Wild Sexual, where he talks about how much he loves vaginas. And this No Worries single, where Anderson .Paak also lets us know that he is a fan of the vagina. And that's cool. I'm not here to hate. I'm not here to judge. It's not what I do. This is a safe space, and I want this to continue to be a safe space. But man, really excited about that record. I think you should be excited about that record too. What else? I will say this. I finished watching The Get Down, which is hip-hop related, and I was really skeptical The dude, Dart Adams, wrote, I think, a really good critical piece that I think still stands about it. But problems aside, it was pretty good. And I definitely, like, hip-hop still hasn't had its kind of defining movie or TV show or whatever it might be. But this is pretty good. I think Baz Luhrmann's kind of a goofy guy, and at certain points makes it more about his theatrical vision than it is about a kind of faithful representation of the origins of hip-hop. But there's still some really good stuff. And man, like on the final episode, this isn't a spoiler or anything, but when you finally see the Get Down Brothers, which is the crew we see formed in this battle doing well, it brought a little tear to my eye. There's something really cool about it. And I think if you don't know your hip-hop history, watch the Get Down, but maybe read some stuff alongside of that. Only other thing that happened this week that I hate to bring up gossipy shit like this, but I got a kick out of this Kid Cudi rant where Kid Cudi kind of went at Kanye and Drake, amongst others, made this comment that I loved where he said, like, you got rappers in your top 5 when they have 30 people writing their songs. Kanye got really mad and said he made him and that he wore skinny jeans before everyone else. And then Drake had a really corny diss line during a thing. But I don't know, Kid Cudi, like Lupe Fiasco, another person who was super weird, has put out some really good music, some questionable music. But it's nice to have people in the hip-hop world to just say shit like it is. And it is true. If you have 30 people writing your music, you're probably not that good of an MC. And if you haven't physically made a beat with your hands in a few albums, you're probably not that good of a producer. I don't know. I just don't know. But that's it for this week. Sorry to leave you with that gossip. It is what it is. Once again, hit me up at Michael O. Burns on Twitter. I would love to get some recommendations from you. Let me know what you think about what we're talking about. And as always, enjoy the whole podcast. Catch you guys next week.
Cruising the sky as smoothly as a bird, you scarcely realize you are traveling.
All right, thanks so much, Mike, for that. Definitely into Mike talking about some classic albums every once in a while. Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor, that's one of my favorites.
Is that classic? It's 10 years old. That's not classic.
Oh, in hip-hop terms, it's pretty classic.
Yeah, I guess when the whole music genre is only like 40 years old itself.
Yeah, is Michael Jordan a classic basketball player? Is he a legend? Yeah, I'd say that.
He's a legend. Yeah, he's
only been retired for about 13 years.
So is Lupe Fiasco the Michael Jordan of hip-hop? Is that the comparison you're making?
Oh, of course not.
Oh,
I'm just talking about in terms of when you can become a legend.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just making sure.
Yeah, if you're writing like literature, yeah, well, you gotta take 200 years because literature's been around for fucking always.
Mm-hmm. So is Murakami classic literature?
I'm not getting into that.
Is Umberto Eco, Name of the Rose, is that a classic text?
For me, I can't say enough about literature to determine what's a classic and what's not.
Oh, now you're backtracking, huh? 200 years.
Did a powerful white man write it? That's basically the question you have to ask when you're asking if it's a classic of literature, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, you know what's weird? I don't know shit about Lupe Fiasco. So I kind of got excited when he mentioned it because I'm like, oh, fuck, okay, I'm gonna go to Apple Music since I am on that 3-month trial right now, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna stream that tonight, actually. That and then the new Mac Miller album I'm looking forward to because I do like Mac Miller and I really like that song Dang.
Yeah.
I really like too how Michael was kind of skittish about the vaginas that were being mentioned in the songs. So you got like Mac and Paak and that Knowledge. What was Anderson .Paak and Knowledge? That song they were very vagina heavy. But isn't that like a large majority of hip hop is very vagina heavy?
But you can't say it in the classroom, apparently.
You can't say vagina in a classroom?
Well, there was that science teacher who was teaching on biology, and parents complained because he used the word vagina.
What are you supposed? What word are you supposed to use?
Yeah, what are you supposed to say?
That's the craziest thing I ever heard.
Or hoo-ha?
A hoo-ha. Okay, now this is the woman's hoo-ha. Yeah. I like that. You know, when I was younger, when I was a little boy, I used to call it a pugina. So, like, my mom would take me to SeaWorld, and you know how you could, like, go in those little tunnels, and the fish would be swimming over your head? And I'd be like, oh, Mom, look, it's the dolphin's pugina. So, to this day, my mom still likes to bring that up whenever I bring a girl over to the house. So, thanks, Mom. Thanks for looking out for your boy's sex life. Well, sweet. No, yeah, I'm stoked, man. And then we got to check out the Get Down. If we're talking about Atlanta, which is, I guess it's a hip hop show, but probably got to check out the Get Down too, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it's a completely different like genre and mood from Atlanta, but it sounds interesting though, for sure.
Yeah, so I'll check that shit out this week. We have homework. You have homework, Owls at Dawn, parliamentary folk. Homework. Sticky Leave recommendation is Atlanta, and then from Michael Burns we have Get Down. You're just going to be saturated with hip-hop this week.
Yeah, how do we grade that then?
I'll take written essays or visual essays. Go ahead and send your art projects to troypolidori@gmail.com. He doesn't have enough on his plate, so you can feel free to overload him. And for me, just send me a tweet. Just send me a tweet and tell me what you thought about him, and that'll be good. Yeah, but Troy wants full essays, 3 to 5 pages, please. Single space.
I'm going to have a filter on my email to redirect and forward all emails to you.
Right on. But for real, kind of joking aside about reaching out on Twitter, do hit us up. We are going to be doing maybe some more fan-based or listener-based, I should say. I don't know if we have fans, but listener-based episodes. So if you have any thoughts or any political issues, social issues, philosophical issues, theologically inclined issues, anything like that you would love to hear us bullshit about for an hour or so, please hit us up on Twitter at owls_at_dawn, or on Instagram, same handle, owls_at_dawn. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you think about the show. Let us know if you have any requests for topics, and we will definitely do our best to include them into listener-based episodes in the future.
And if you want an episode based on personal grooming tips, just let Austin know, and he can do a solo episode, and I can just GTFO.
That's right. Instagram is AUS_HAY. Hit me up. Feel free to send me your own personal manscaping needs, and I can recommend my solutions. Boom. Thanks, Dick.
All right, Das Vidania, Amerikanski.